The interrupted joy. The happiest of women on this day was Elisheba, daughter of Amminadab. Besides the general rejoicing at the dedication of the sanctuary, 5 particular joys fell to her lot. Her husband, Aaron, was high priest, her brother-in-law, Moses, king, her son, Eleazar, head of the priests, her grandson, Phinehas, priest of war, and her brother, Nahshon, prince of his tribe. But soon her joy was turned to grief. Her 2 sons, Nadab and Abihu, carried away by the universal rejoicing at the heavenly fire, approached the sanctuary with the censers in their hands to increase God's love for Israel through this act of sacrifice. But they paid with their lives. From the Holy of Holies issued 2 flames of fire, as thin as threads, then parted into 4, and 2 each pierced the nostrils of Nadab and Abihu, whose souls were burned, although no external injury was visible. The death of these priests was not, however, unmerited, for in spite of their piety they had committed many a sin. Even at Sinai they had not conducted themselves properly, for instead of following the example of Moses, who had turned his face away from the divine vision in the burning bush, they basked in the divine vision of Mount Sinai. Their fate had then been decreed, but God did not want to darken the joy of the Torah by their death. Hence, he waited for the dedication of the tabernacle. On this occasion, God acted like the king who, discovering on the day of his daughter's wedding that the best man was guilty of a deadly sin, said, "If I cause the best man to be executed on the spot, I shall cast a shadow on my daughter's joy. I will rather have him executed on my day of gladness than on hers." God inflicted the penalty upon Nadab and Abihu in the day of gladness of his heart, and not on the day on which the Torah became one with Israel. Among the sins for which those 2 had to atone was their great pride, which was expressed in several ways. They did not marry because they considered no woman good enough, saying, "Our father's brother is king, our father is high priest, our mother's brother is prince of his tribe, and we are heads of the priests. What woman is worthy of us?" And many a woman remained unwed, waiting for these 2 youths to woo her. In their pride, they even went so far in sinful thoughts as to wish for the time when Moses and Aaron should die, and they would have the guidance of the people in their hands. But God said, "Boast not of tomorrow. Many a colt has died, and his hide has been used as cover for his mother's back." Even in the performance of the act that brought death upon them, they showed their pride, for they asked permission of neither Moses nor Aaron whether they should take part in the sacrificial service. What is more, Nadab and Abihu did not even consult with each other before starting out on this fatal deed. They performed it independently of each other. Had they previously taken counsel together, or had they asked their father and their uncle, very likely they would have never offered the disastrous sacrifice, for they were neither in proper condition for making an offering, nor was their offering appropriate. They partook of wine before entering the sanctuary, which is forbidden to priests. They did not wear the prescribed priestly robes, and furthermore, they had not sanctified themselves with water out of the bowl for washing. They had made their offering, moreover, in the Holy of Holies, to which admittance had been prohibited, and used strange fire, and the offering was all in all out of place because they had no command from God to offer up incense at that time. Apart from this list of sins, however, they were very pious men, and their death grieved God more than it did their father Aaron, not only because it grieves God to see a pious father lose his sons, but because they were actually worthy and pious youths. When Aaron heard of the death of his sons, he said, "O Lord of the world, all Israel saw you at the Red Sea as well as at Sinai, without suffering injury. But my sons, whom you ordered to dwell in the tabernacle, a place that a layman may not enter without being punished by death, my sons who entered the tabernacle to behold your strength and your might, died." God then said to Moses, "Tell Aaron the following. I have shown you a great favor and have granted you great honor through this, that your sons have been burned. I assigned you and your sons a place near to the sanctuary before all others, even before your brother Moses. But I have also decreed that whoever enters the tabernacle without having been commanded, he shall be stricken with leprosy. Would you have wished your sons, to whom the innermost places had been assigned, to sit as lepers outside of the encampment as penalty for having entered the Holy of Holies? When Moses imparted these words to his brother, Aaron said, I thank you, O God, for that which you have shown me in causing my sons to die, rather than having them waste their lives as lepers. It behooves me to thank you and praise you, because your loving kindness is better than life. My lips shall praise you. Moses endeavored to comfort his brother in still another way, saying, Your sons died to glorify the name of the Lord. Blessed be his name, for on Sinai God said to me, And there I will meet the children of Israel. The tabernacle shall be sanctified by those that glorify me. I knew that this sanctuary was to be sanctified by the death of those that stood near it, but I thought either you or I was destined for this. But now I perceive that your sons were nearer to God than we. These last words sufficed to induce Aaron to control his grief over the loss of his sons, and like the true wise man, he bore silently the heavy blow, without murmur or lament. God rewarded him for his silence by addressing him directly and imparting an important priestly law to him. Aaron could not take part in the burial of Nadab and Abihu, for a high priest is not permitted to take part in a funeral procession, even if the deceased be a near kinsman. Eleazar and Ithamar also, the surviving sons of Aaron, were not permitted to mourn or attend the funeral on the day of their dedication as priests, so that Aaron's cousins, the Levite Mishael and Eliphan, the next of kin after these, had to attend the funeral. These two Levites were the sons of a very worthy man, who was not only by descent a near kinsman of Aaron, but also closely akin to Aaron in character. As Aaron pursued peace, so too did his uncle Uzziel, father to Mishael and Eliphan. Being Levites, they might not enter the place where the heavenly fire had met their cousins. Hence, an angel had thrust Nadab and Abihu out of the priestly room, and they did not die until they were outside of it, so that Mishael and Eliphan might approach them. Whereas the whole house of Israel was bidden to bewail the death of Nadab and Abihu, for the death of a pious man is greater misfortune for Israel than the temple's burning to ashes, Aaron and his sons were permitted to take no share in the mourning, and Moses told them to eat the parts of the offering due them, as if nothing had happened. Now, when Moses saw that Aaron had burned to ashes one of the 3 sin offerings that were offered on that day, without himself or his sons having partaken of it, his wrath was kindled against his brother. But, in consideration of Aaron's age and his office, Moses addressed his violent words not to Aaron himself, but to his sons. He reproached them with having offended God's commandment in burning one sin offering and eating the other 2. He asked them besides if they were not wise enough to profit by the example of their deceased brothers, who paid for their arbitrary actions with their lives, and they owed their lives only to the power of his prayer, which had the power to preserve for their father half the number of his sons. Moses' reproof, however, was unjustified, for Aaron and his sons had done what the statutes required, but Moses had on this occasion, as on 2 others, owing to his wrath, forgotten the laws which he himself had taught Israel. Hence, Aaron opposed him decidedly and pointed out his error. Moses, far from taking Aaron's reprimand amiss, caused a herald to make an announcement throughout the camp. I have falsely interpreted the law, and Aaron, my brother, has corrected me. Eleazar and Ithamar also knew the law, but were silent out of consideration for me. As a reward for their considerateness, God revealed important laws to Moses with a special injunction to tell them to Aaron as well as to Eleazar and Ithamar. The gifts of the princes. When Moses called on the people to make their offerings for the erection of the sanctuary, it sorely vexed the princes of the tribes that he had not summoned them particularly. Hence they withheld their contributions, waiting for the people to give according to their powers, so that they might step in and make up the deficiency, and then everyone would know that without them the tabernacle could not have been completed. But they were mistaken, for in their ready devotion the people provided all needful things for the sanctuary, and when the princes of the tribes perceived their mistake and then brought their contributions, it was too late. All that they could do was to provide the jewels for the robes of the high priest, but they could no longer take a hand in the erection of the tabernacle. On the day of the dedication, they tried to make partial amends for missing their opportunity by following the advice of the tribe of Issachar, renowned for wisdom and erudition, to bring wagons for the transportation of the tabernacle. These princes of the tribes were no upstarts or men newly risen to honor. They were men who even in Egypt had been in office and exposed to the anger of the Egyptians. They had also stood at Moses' side when he undertook the census of the people. They now brought as an offering to Moses 6 covered wagons, fully equipped and even painted blue, the color of the sky, and also 12 oxen to draw the wagons. The number of wagons, as well as of oxen, had been set with purpose. The 6 wagons corresponded to the 6 days of creation, to the 6 mothers, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, to the 6 laws that the Torah prescribes exclusively for the king, to the 6 orders of Mishnah, and to the 6 heavens. The number of oxen corresponded to the 12 constellations and to the 12 tribes. Moses did not want at first to accept the teams, but God not only told him to accept them, he also ordered him to address the princes kindly and to thank them for their gifts. Moses now even thought that the Shekinah had deserted him and would rest on the princes of the tribes, assuming that they had received direct communication from God to make this offering to the sanctuary. But God said to Moses, "If it had been a direct command from me, I would have ordered you to tell them. But they did this on their own initiative, which indeed meets with my wish." Moses now accepted the gifts, not without misgivings, fearing lest a wagon should break or an ox die, leaving the tribe unrepresented by a gift. God assured him that no accident would occur to either wagon or ox. Yes, a great miracle came to pass in regard to these wagons and oxen, for the animals live forever without ailing or growing old, and the wagons likewise endure to all eternity. Moses then distributed the wagons among the Levites, so that the division of the sons of Gershom received 2 wagons for the transportation of the heavy portions of the tabernacle, boards, bars, and similar things, whereas the former, having the lighter portions, had enough with 1 wagon. The 3rd division of Levites, the sons of Kohath, received no wagons, for they were entrusted with the transportation of the Holy Ark, which might not be lifted upon a wagon, but was to be borne upon their shoulders. David, who forgot to observe this law and had the ark lifted on a wagon, paid heavily for his negligence, for the priests who tried to carry the ark to the wagon were flung down on the ground. Ahithophel then called David's attention to the need of following the example of Kohath's sons, who bore the ark on their shoulders through the desert, and David then ordered them to do the same. But the princes of the tribes were not content with having provided the means for transporting the sanctuary. They wanted to be the first, on the day of dedication, to present offerings. As with the wagons, Moses was doubtful whether or not to permit them to bring their offerings, for these were of an unusual kind that were not ordinarily permissible. But God told him to accept the dedicated offerings of the princes, though Moses was still in doubt whether to let all 12 princes make their offerings on the same day, or to set a special day for each, and if so, in what order should they make their offerings. God then revealed to him that each one of the princes of the tribes was to sacrifice on a special day, and that Nahshon, the prince of Judah, was to be first. He was rewarded in this way for the devotion he had shown God during the passage through the Red Sea. When Israel, beset by the Egyptians, reached the sea, the tribes among themselves started quarreling who should go into the sea first. Then suddenly Nahshon, the prince of Judah, plunged into the sea, firmly trusting that God would stand by Israel in their need. Nahshon's offering was 1 silver charger that had been fashioned for the sanctuary, the weight of which was 130 shekels. 2 bowls of equal size but lighter weight, of 70 shekels, and both of them full of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering. Furthermore, a spoon made of 10 shekels of gold, full of incense. 1 young bullock, the best of his herd, 1 excellent ram, and 1 lamb a year old. These 3 for a burnt offering, and a kid of the goats for a sin offering, to atone for a possible uncleanliness in the sanctuary. These sacrifices and gifts Nahshon offered out of his own possessions, not out of those of his tribe. God's acceptance of the offerings of the princes shows how dear they were to God, for at no other time was an individual allowed to offer up incense, as Nahshon and his fellows did. They also brought sin offerings, which is ordinarily not permitted, unless one is conscious of having committed a sin. Finally, the prince of the tribe of Ephraim brought his offer on the 7th day of the dedication, which was on a Sabbath, though ordinarily none but the daily sacrifice may be offered on the Sabbath. The offerings of all the princes of the tribes were identical, but they had a different significance for each tribe. From the time of Jacob, who foretold it to them, every tribe knew his future history to the time of the Messiah. Hence, at the dedication, every prince brought such offerings as symbolized the history of his tribe. Nahshon, the prince of Judah, brought a silver charger and a silver bowl, the one to stand for the sea, the other for the mainland, indicating that out of his tribe would spring such men as Solomon and the Messiah, who would rule over the whole world, both land and sea. The golden spoon of 10 shekels signified the 10 generations from Perez, son of Judah, to David, first of the Judean kings, whose actions were sweet as the incense contained in the spoon. The 3 burnt offerings, the bull, the ram, and the lamb, corresponded to the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whereas the kid of the goat was to atone for the sin of Judah, who sought to deceive his father with the blood of a kid. The 2 oxen of the peace offering pointed to David and Solomon, and the 3 small cattle of the peace offering, the rams, the goats, and the lambs, corresponded to the descendants and successors of these 2 Judean kings, and these, who may also be classified into 3 groups, the very pious, the very wicked, and those who were neither wicked nor pious. On the 2nd day of the dedication appeared the prince of the tribe of Reuben, who wanted to present his offering, saying, "It is enough that Judah was permitted to offer sacrifice before me. Surely it is time for our tribe to present our offerings." But Moses informed him that God had ordained that the tribe should present offerings in the order in which they moved through the desert, so that the tribe of Issachar followed Judah. This tribe had altogether good claims to be among the first to offer sacrifices, for in the first place this tribe devoted itself completely to the study of the Torah, so that the great scholars in Israel were among them. And then, too, it was this tribe that had proposed to the others the idea of bringing the dedication offerings. As this was the tribe of great knowledge and learning, its gifts symbolized things appertaining to the Torah. The silver charger and the silver bowl corresponded to the written and to the oral Torah, and both vessels alike are filled with fine flour, for the 2 laws are not antagonistic, but form a unity, and contain the loftiest teachings. The fine flour was mingled with oil, just as knowledge of the Torah should be added to good deeds. For he who occupies himself with the Torah, who works good deeds, and keeps himself aloof from sin, fills his Creator with delight. The golden spoon of 10 shekels symbolizes the 2 tables on which God with his finger wrote the 10 commandments, and which contained between the commandments all the particulars of the Torah, just as the spoon was filled with incense. The 3 burnt offerings, the bull, the ram, and the lamb, corresponded to the 3 groups of priests, Levites, and Israelites, whereas the kid of the goats alluded to the converts, for the Torah was revealed not only for Israel, but for the whole world, and a convert who studies the Torah is no less than a priest. The 2 oxen of the peace offering corresponded to the oral and written Torah, the study of which brings peace on earth and peace in heaven. After Nahshon, the temporal king, and Nathanael, the spiritual king, came the turn of Eliab, the prince of the tribe of Zebulun. This tribe owed its distinction to the circumstance that it followed commerce, and through the profits thereof was able to maintain the tribe of Issachar, which, entirely devoted to study, could not support itself. The charger and the bowl that he presented to the sanctuary symbolize food and drink, with which Zebulun provides the scholar tribe Issachar. The spoon indicated the border of the sea, which Jacob, in his blessing, had bestowed on Zebulun as his possession, and the 10 shekels of its weight correspond to the 10 words of which this blessing consisted. The 2 oxen point to the 2 blessings which Moses bestowed on Zebulun, as the 3 small cattle, the ram, the goat, and the lamb, corresponded to the 3 kings which gave Zebulun's possessions distinction before all others, the tuni, the purple snail, and white glass. After the first tribes that belonged to Judah's camp division had brought their offerings, followed Reuben and the tribes belonging to his division. The gifts of the tribe of Reuben symbolized the events in the life of their forefather, Reuben. The silver charger recalled Reuben's words when he saved Joseph's life, whom the other brothers wanted to kill, for the tongue of the just is as choice as silver. The silver bowl, from which sprinkled the sacrificial blood, recalled the same incident, for it was Reuben who advised his brothers to throw Joseph into the pit rather than kill him. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold symbolized the deed of Reuben, who restrained Jacob's sons from bloodshed. Hence, the gold out of which the spoon was fashioned had a blood-red color. The spoon was filled with incense, and so too did Reuben fill his days with fasting and prayer, until God forgave his sin with Bilhah, and his prayer was set forth before the Lord as incense. As penance for his crime, Reuben offered the kid of goats as a sin offering, whereas the 2 oxen of the peace offering corresponded to the 2 great deeds of Reuben, the deliverance of Joseph and the long penance for his sin. Just as Reuben interceded to save his brother Joseph's life, so did Simon rise up for his sister Dinah when he took vengeance upon the inhabitants of Shechem for the wrong they had done her. Hence, the prince of the tribe of Simon followed the prince of the tribe of Reuben. As the sanctuary was destined to punish unchastity among Israel, so were the gifts of the tribe whose sire figured as the avenger of unchastity. The charger corresponded to the court that surrounded the tabernacle, and therefore weighed 130 shekels, to correspond with the size of the court that measured 100 cubits, of which the tabernacle occupied 30. The bowl of 70 shekels corresponded to the empty space of the tabernacle. These 2, the charger and the bowl, were filled with fine flour mingled with oil, because in the court of the tabernacle were offered up meat offerings mingled with oil. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold corresponded to the scroll of the Torah, and the tables with the 10 commandments that rested in the ark. The sacrificial animals, the bull, the ram, the lamb, and the kid, corresponded to the 4 different kinds of curtains and hangings that were used in the sanctuary, and were fashioned out of the hides of these animals. The 2 oxen of the peace offering pointed to the 2 curtains, the one in front of the tabernacle, the other in front of the court, whereas the 3 kinds of small cattle that were used as offerings corresponded to the 3 curtains of the court, one to the north, one to the south, and one to the west. And as each of these was 5 cubits long, so were 5 of each kind presented as offerings. As Simon, sword in hand, battled for his sister, so, by force of arms, did the tribe of Gad set out to gain the land beyond the Jordan for their brethren. Therefore did the prince follow Shelumiel, prince of Simon, with his offerings. This tribe, so active in gaining the promised land, symbolized in its gifts the exodus from Egypt, which alone made possible the march on Palestine. The charger of the weight of 130 shekels alluded to Jochebed, who at the age of 130 bore Moses, who had symbolical connection with the bowl, for he was thrown into the Nile. This bowl weighed 70 shekels, as Moses extended his prophetic spirit over the 70 elders. And as the bowl was filled with flour, so did Moses' prophetic spirit in no way diminish because the 70 elders shared in prophecy. The 3 burned offerings recalled the 3 virtues Israel possessed in Egypt, which were instrumental in their deliverance. They did not alter their Hebrew names, they did not alter the Hebrew language, and they lived lives of chastity. The sin offerings were to atone for the idolatry to which they were addicted in Egypt, so that God did not permit their deliverance until they had renounced idolatry. The 2 oxen of peace corresponded to Jacob and Joseph, for whose sake God had delivered Israel out of Egypt. 15 head of small cattle as sacrifice, because God was mindful of his vow to the 3 patriarchs and the 12 fathers of the tribes, and released Israel out of bondage. A special distinction was granted to the tribe of Ephraim, for God allowed their prince to make his offering on the Sabbath, a day on which otherwise only the daily offerings were allowed to be offered. This distinction the tribe of Ephraim owed to its ancestor Joseph, in recognition of his strict observance of the Sabbath as governor of Egypt. The gifts of this tribe represent the history of Jacob and Joseph, for the descendants of the latter owed much to Jacob's love for his son Joseph. The charger alluded to Jacob, the bowl to Joseph. And as both these vessels were filled with fine flour, mingled with oil, so too were both Jacob and Joseph very pious men, and the course of their lives ran evenly. The spoon symbolized Jacob's right hand, which he laid on the head of Ephraim to bless him. The 3 burned offerings corresponded to the 3 patriarchs, whereas the kid of goats stood for Joseph, whose coat had been smeared with the kid's blood. The 2 oxen of the peace offering indicated the 2 blessings that the sons of Joseph had received from their grandfather, Jacob, and the 3 kinds of small cattle that were offered as peace offerings corresponded to the 3 generations of Ephraim that Joseph was permitted to see before his death. Joseph not only observed the Sabbath, he was also chaste and was not tempted by Potiphar's wife, and he was faithful in the service of his master. God therefore said to Joseph, "You have kept the 7th commandment, you shall not commit adultery, and did not commit adultery with Potiphar's wife. And you have also kept the following commandment, the 8th, you shall not steal, for you stole neither Potiphar's money nor his conjugal happiness. Hence, there will come a time when I shall give you the reward due you, when, hereafter, the princes of the tribes will offer their offerings at the dedication of the altar. The 2 princes among your descendants shall one after the other offer their offerings, the one on the 7th, the other on the 8th day of the dedication, as a reward because you observed the 7th and 8th commandments." The prince of the tribe of Manasseh now followed that of Ephraim, trying, like the preceding, symbolically to represent Jacob's and Joseph's lives. The charger, of 130 shekels in weight, indicated that Jacob, at the age of 130 years, migrated to Egypt for the sake of Joseph. The bowl of 70 shekels corresponded to Joseph, who caused 70 souls of the Hebrews to migrate to Egypt. The spoon of 10 shekels of gold indicated the 10 portions of land that fell to Manasseh. The 3 burned offerings corresponded to the 3 generations of Manasseh that Joseph was permitted to see before his death, whereas the kid of the goats recalled Jair, the son of Manasseh, who died childless. The 2 oxen of the peace offering indicated that the possessions of the tribe of Manasseh were to be divided into 2 parts, one on this side of the Jordan and one beyond it. The 3 kinds of small cattle for peace offerings corresponded to the triple attempt of Joseph to influence his father in favor of Manasseh, whereas the 5 head of each indicated the 5 daughters of Zelophehad, the only women who, like men, received their shares in the distribution of the Promised Land. Continued in Section 58. End part 57 of 95, The Legends of the Jews.com.